previously given testimony, so we'll delve right into the questions. And the chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming back.
Good afternoon.
And I have an opening statement. This has to do with the reconciliations I'd like to make, then I'm going to get to the questions. But I want to begin by sharing a statement from a taxpayer who's a certified professional accountant with the following credentials: a Master's of Science in Taxation, a Chartered Global Management Accountant, a former adjunct professor of accounting for 20 years, and a former partner of a Big Four accounting firm. Monthly bank reconciliations, he stated, are a basic, normal, and critical component of a set of internal controls that public companies and other large organizations employ and are required to have. Internal controls are intended to identify and thwart errors and irregularities and to safeguard assets. Irregularities include theft and fraud. First semester accounting students learn about bank reconciliations and internal controls. They are that basic, fundamental. Errors and irregularities within the cash disbursement system cannot be found without a monthly bank reconciliation, which is employed to safeguard that asset as part of a normal set of internal controls. It uncovers the difference between the bank's balance and the organization's cash balance in its general ledger. Reconciling differences, including outstanding checks not cashed, deposits in transit, bank charges and credits not booked, and other miscellaneous differences. If there are errors or irregularities, they may be found through this process. Without it, the organization risks writing checks from an overdrawn account, resulting in bouncing checks. In fact, if a public company did not reconcile its accounts, it would not receive an unqualified good opinion from its auditors, and the CFO would receive a stern management letter that internal controls are lacking. It's unheard of for a $4.6 billion organization like the City of Philadelphia, with a capital program of $4 billion, totaling over $8.6, not to have internal controls, or to have internal controls but not to execute upon them. This is not a matter of complex accounting issues like those found in accounting for derivatives. Reconciling cash is as basic as an auto mechanic changing and securing a tire. Not reconciling cash is tantamount to that mechanic not tightening the lug nut when changing a tire. Mr. President, this is just one example of the countless phone calls, emails, letters, and other communications my office has received regarding this issue that has come to light in recent weeks. I learned about the lack of reconciliations of the city's financial records during our ongoing budget debate for fiscal year 2019, and I feel responsible to all of the citizens of this city to help provide answers on this fiscal management of their tax dollars. I also feel equally responsible to provide a specific time frame when these accounts will be reconciled, and feel responsible to help find and track the money that appears to be missing. And lastly, I feel a strong responsibility to help work together and find a solution for us going forward to prevent this from ever happening again. So today I'm interested in discussing the issue of the $27.5 million that is still missing from our accounts, as well as all the unreconciled accounts and what actually occurred. I've been a city councilman at large in Philadelphia since January 2016, and I feel it is imperative to address this very important issue. The treasurer, Ms. Rashia Johnson, said in a previous testimony that she could not speak to historical issues in our last hearing. Therefore, I've asked Rob DeBoe and Ms. Johnson to be present today in order to help address the history of our reconciliation problem. I've also asked Mr. Chris Schwartz and City Controller Reinhardt to attend, but they were unavailable. The goal of today is to gather all the facts on this issue in order to understand what happened, how we're going to resolve it, and how we're going to put in place the systems to prevent this from ever happening again. The facts as they were presented to me over the last few weeks from two testimonies by Mr. Rob DeBoe and Ms. Rashia Johnson are that we have not reconciled our accounts from the timeline I will outline right now. The City of Philadelphia payroll, and by the way, there were 3 different dates from when this was not reconciled. In one testimony, it was December of 2010. In another testimony, it was June of 2010. And in the controller's report, it was September of 2010. These accounts were not reconciled from 2010 until June 30th of 2017 and remain unreconciled. This is the City of Philadelphia's payroll account. This account currently has a payroll amount that is about $1.7 billion per year, and if we assume over the time period an average payroll of $1.4 billion, since it was lower in the earlier years, we still have not reconciled $10 billion of payroll checks that have gone through this account. $10 billion is not reconciled. The consolidated cash account, also called ConCash, we have not reconciled from June of 2014 to June of 2017. This is the account, as I understand it, where we collect all our tax receipts. So the real estate taxes that everyone pays us, which are about $1.3 billion, including the school portion, the wage tax, which is $1.9 billion, the transfer taxes of $287 million, BERT taxes, net income and gross receipts, $413 million, parking tax, $98 million, the beverage tax close to $80 million, sales tax $188 million. It basically totals $4.5 billion, but I'm going to assume a lower figure of $3.8 billion because it's over time. Not reconciling the ConCash account, the consolidated cash account, for 3 years, assuming a lower number of $3.8 billion, means we have not reconciled deposits of $11.4 billion from the period of 2014 to 2017. Revenue, as I understand it, makes a deposit of taxes almost every day. We have receipts, but we have not reconciled the bank deposits to those receipts. They should be reconciled daily, let alone not in 3 years. We have no idea if all dollars actually enter the bank by not having this reconciliation. Third account is the general disbursement account, not reconciled since June of 2012, where most of the city's checks are written from, roughly $3.8 billion per year on average. So through June of 2017, went from June of 2012 to June of 2017, 5 years, not reconciled. It's about $19 billion. These are checks we write out of the city for general disbursement account. The pension account, for all those people who have worked for the city of Philadelphia and earned a pension, this account has not been reconciled since June of 14 through June of 17, or about 3 years. This account roughly represents, on average, $600 million per year. It's higher today. I'm using a lower number to be conservative. This is about $1.8 billion. It hasn't been reconciled from the payroll account for 3 years. There's a PPDA settlement account that hasn't been reconciled. I don't have a figure for this account, but I believe it's a smaller figure. We were told in testimony it was less than $10 million, but this has not been reconciled since December of 2015. So overall, my concern is that we have close to $40 billion of deposits and checks that were not reconciled timely. We currently sit here today trying to locate $27.5 million, down from $33 million, which was down from $40 million, and we're trying to find that money, but at this point, that money has not been found. The reconciliations, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying this money is missing, but the accounts haven't been reconciled. So my first question for you, Rob, is just to give some history on this. When did you start as the finance director for the city of Philadelphia?
In January 2008.
In your opinion, why is the reconciliation of accounts considered important?
I think you've described why it's important. It's important for us to know what's happening with our money.
Is that the main benefit of the reconciliation?
Yeah.
What do you think it prevents?
Well, I think it prevents the kind of confusion we're going through now about why there would be a difference between what's in our accounting system and what's in our bank accounts.
Okay. And as finance director, do you recall the first time that you learned that the accounts were not reconciled in a timely manner?
I can't give you an exact time. I know it's happened over the years.
Okay. Would you say it was in 2011, 2010, 2009?
I just don't remember. I can't.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of how many times you were informed?
I don't, and I also know there were times when we'd fall behind and times when we'd catch up, so I can't give you that answer either.
But for the payroll account from June of 2010 till June of 2017, There was no catch-up there. That was 7 straight years of not being reconciled. And so there were reports by the Controller's Office issued that indicated from '07 to '09, that period of time, there was a problem with reconciliation. And that report was issued in 2012, and a press release was done in 2011 about it. There was another report after that, and there was another report in 2016, where everyone in this government was copied on. So you don't remember when you were told the accounts weren't reconciled, but would you say it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago?
Well, it's more complicated than that because there were times when they had been behind, times when we caught up. So I think over the course of those 10 years, it was probably multiple times.
I mean, I have in my hand the Controller's report from '07 to '09, where it was reported that there were several instances where the accounts weren't reconciled, including in here, I won't just give you an idea. It says, we reported that the Treasurer's Office did not reconcile the book balances of 61 out of 66 accounts to related bank statement balances for over 11 months. And that report was '07 to '09, and it was reported in 11 and 12. And there's more reports like that. I'm not going to get into every detail. So I'm trying to understand, though, when you found out about it and what you did about it once you found out.
Right. So we've tried to do various things over time. We've brought in outside help. We've brought in a deputy for cash management. We've had changes in the treasurer over that time. So there have been a number of things over the years that we tried to do to catch up.
Now, the Controller in her testimony, the current Controller, said the failure to reconcile is a material weakness and it was extremely concerning. Those were her words. Does that concern you?
It does, and that's why we have put in place a plan to eliminate all the backlog in reconciliations and to keep up with reconciliations going forward.
If these accounts hadn't been reconciled for several years and it's considered a material weakness and extremely concerning, what would have been the reason why for 7 years the payroll account wasn't addressed?
As I said, we had a number of things that happened. We had people leave, we had turnover. I can tell you what we're doing now to try to eliminate it, which I think is kind of what you said. You want to focus on going forward, and so do we.
So just so you know, in all the information, and I took this whole weekend, maybe 30 hours, and studied all this stuff. I read through every report. The comments in 2012 are almost identical in 2016, where it says we had a shortage of people, we're working on getting it caught up, and we'll try to address it. That's been the company line.
And now we have added people, so we have more staffing, and we have outside help.
To the best of your knowledge, since 2008, has every city treasurer been made aware of the responsibility to reconcile our accounts?
I think they all knew of that responsibility, yes.
Every one of them who came in. And were they aware of the reports highlighting our failure to reconcile? Because those are public record.
I assume they were, yeah.
And so when a new person transitions into the job as treasurer, is there a briefing that occurs?
I don't know there's a particular briefing, but there's, a transition process.
Like an orientation?
Yeah.
And was that discussed at the orientations of the treasurers for the last 10 years?
I don't know whether, well, I'm sure it was discussed with them over time. It's not like a first day sit down and do a briefing.
I mean, I think that as a rule of thumb going forward, not just in the Treasury Department, but in many departments, we should put forth a better training program where whoever's taking the positions has at least the last 10 years of all the records of the city that is produced, and they have to read that information and understand it and know what's going on. Because if somebody took the time to read these reports that I have for 10 years, you would have been fixing this immediately.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're doing with the outside group is working to improve their internal controls to make sure that, the
But
appropriate
I'm just saying,
things
as a
happen.
rule of thumb going forward, when we transition new people, we should have a detailed list of the orientation and what's required, and go back in time and show them everything that occurred. Did you discuss with the current treasurer the fact that reconciliations were outstanding?
I think we've had a number of conversations about reconciliations over time.
And what was the conclusion of, and do you have an idea with our current treasurer, when was the first time you discussed with our current treasurer that reconciliations were a problem?
I can't give you an exact date. I know we've talked about it over time, which is kind of how we wound up putting together the plan we have now. We had also, before that, used outside auditing help to try to catch up. So it's something we've talked about over time and developed a plan.
Our current treasurer testified in a prior hearing that, budget meeting, that when she came into office in January of 16, she learned about it in May of 16. And she didn't know really the depth of it until May of 16. And then, for some reason, it took us 17 months for us to come up with an RFP in October, November of 17 months later, to hire an outside firm. And I guess one of my questions was, why did it take us 17 months to resolve that, what we knew, when we knew reconciliations were a problem for so many years?
We had tried a different approach at first. We brought outside auditing help.
Yep, but one, you had to understand, right, one, you had to understand the depth of the problem and dig into it, and so I can speak to why it took to that point. I need to understand and get into myself why where current staff was, where the gaps were, and what we needed, and started having conversation with other departments we work with, like revenue and finance accounting. And then from there, that's when we brought in the outside accountant to come in. And we worked with that person for a while and started to understand the problem and dig into it a little deeper. And then that's when we started to ask for additional help and realized that we needed, if current staff could keep things going, we needed someone else to do the look back. So it wasn't like someone was just sitting on their hands for 17 months. We were working on it.
Well, in July 12th of 2016, the Controller's Office issued a report. Report on Internal Control and Other Matters, City of Philadelphia, July 12th, Executive Summary. What the Controller's Office found. The city's financial statements were presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted. The city's CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the fiscal year ended June 30th of 2015, which would have been July 1 of 14 to June 30th. The weaknesses and deficiencies contributed to errors exceeding $1 billion. Many of these require management's attention. Now, there was a report out that said we had $1 billion of errors. Now, I think they got fixed.
Well, yes, if you
okay?
read that, you'll see that by the time the CAFR was out, that was all fixed.
It was fixed. But I
And
guess
that's a separate issue from
Right,
reconciliations,
right.
right?
But my concern with that overall is that if we had $1 billion of errors, that's a red flag that we need more training or better qualified people in that department handling the money. And it also goes on to say, in that report, bank account reconciliations were not timely completed. Over 85% of accounts had not been reconciled until more than 2 months after the fiscal year end. In one instance, the last reconciliation on file for the city's payroll disbursement account was September of 2010. Late preparation of reconciliations can prevent timely detection of errors or worse, irregularities. This was the report from the controller, July 12th of 2016, and it was pretty detailed. When did we find out that the payroll account of 2010 wasn't reconciled? That one account, do we know?
I don't remember.
But it did say it in this report it wasn't reconciled.
That's where the zero balance accounts are.
Do you recall when, our current treasurer sat down with you to talk about the problem of reconciliation? Did she bring that to you, or did you bring that to her?
I don't remember. She may have brought it to me. I know we've been talking about it for a while.
So whose idea was it to open new bank accounts at the end of June of 2017?
So we, I think, probably jointly decided to go through an RFP process.
Right, every 4 years, we go through an RFP process for payroll, and again, through a competitive process, with having a new bank, responsible bidder and winner. That's when we opened new accounts. It had nothing to do with.
And if we went through that process every 4 years, why did the payroll account go unreconciled for 7 years?
We actually went through that process, but I don't think we changed banks in the last process, so we didn't open new accounts.
A prior treasurer I spoke to claims to have requested help to reconcile the accounts. Why did we not provide the treasurer with the resources to manage the finances of the city, especially since the payroll account was so far behind?
We did provide additional resources. I mean, one of the things we provided was a deputy for cash management. So we did provide resources.
And did that solve the problem?
It did not.
So who was monitoring that person that we provided additional, we hired additional people, they didn't do their job, and went on for a long time. Who was monitoring that?
I guess various people over time, I mean, someone in our shops.
In the report from 2011, the controller also talked about material weaknesses from 2007 to 2009, and also referenced again reconciliation. Did we do anything at that point?
I think we did over time take actions, but obviously we fell behind again.
And just to reiterate, in July of 2012, the controller issued another executive summary talking about the $1 billion of errors which were corrected.
Yes.
So we don't have an answer because on this person that you hired as to why none of these reconciliations were done.
Yeah, I mean, there were other issues with other senior people leaving and turnover that contributed to our not being able to keep up.
I mean, at the end of the day, when you add up all these accounts, it's 40 billion plus not reconciled. I'm not saying the money's missing. I'm just saying it's not reconciled. Now, where we are right now, we originally had 40 million missing. I guess
No, we had a difference between, let's just say we had a difference between what's in our accounting system and our bank account.
Right.
40 million.
40
as
million.
opposed
Now it's down to
missing.
33, now it's down to
Down to
27.5.
27, yeah.
And the 6 million from 33.3 to 27.5, where did that come from? What did we find out was the issue there? How did we find that money? What was the issue?
Well, with doing the current reconciliations, we realized some journal entries were not made in that, to transfer money from one account to another within the city.
That was $6 million worth?
Various items, and that was not one item for 6 million, yes.
Is there somebody who supervises that and checks that work?
The reconciliation work? Yes.
I mean, I guess the problem was that that particular account went from 14 to 17 unreconciled. And that's the account where every tax receipt is paid into?
That's correct.
So basically what I envision is Revenue Department records the receipts, it gets deposited, no one's balancing the receipt to the bank balance.
Well, it's not quite that cut and dry. There's several departments that actually collect money and deposit money, and sometimes all of it is not validated. So there's a fine process, and I welcome you to come see how it looks on a daily basis to do the matchup.
But whether I see it or not, what we do know is that for 3 years, the consolidated cash account, which is like 3.8 billion, goes through that, wasn't reconciled. And I think at the last testimony, you mentioned that at the end of June, we should have these accounts reconciled. Is that still on track?
Maybe it's different dates for different
It's different
accounts.
dates for different accounts, but the payroll accounts is slated for June, yep, and they will be, the ones with Wells Fargo will be closed out, yep.
Can you do me a favor? Can you give me the name of each account that's not reconciled and the date that each one will be reconciled?
Yes.
What's the first one?
So you wanted to go through it again like we did last week. So it's a payroll account, which was last reconciled in 2010.
No, I know those dates. I'm saying, when will this new firm have those records reconciled by?
That's being done internally with the additional staff that we have in-house. The accounting firm is not working on the payroll account.
So the payroll account's not being done by an outside auditor?
No.
It's being done in-house?
That's correct.
It's only Concash that's being done. by
You're right, the
outside firm.
consolidated cash account is the only one where the look back is being worked on by the outside accountant firm.
So all the other accounts are being done in-house?
Yes, with the additional resources that we have in staff, yes, that's correct.
And can you give me the list? It's the payroll account, the pension payroll account, the general disbursement account, the consolidated cash account, and that PPDA account, I believe.
That's
right?
correct.
And what you're saying to me now is that the only account being done by the outside auditors is the consolidated cash account.
That's correct.
And you're saying that we internally are doing the other reconciliations?
That's correct.
And all of a sudden, we're able to do them when we couldn't do some of these for 7 years?
Well, I can't say all of a sudden, so with the requests of additional bodies and staff, and there has been some turnover in backfilling positions, we're staffed where we're equipped to handle it, to do the catch-up, and keep current.
Okay. The firm that we've hired for this consolidated cash account, have we checked the backgrounds of that firm carefully?
We went through the RFP process, checked their references and their standings, and yes,
Because I just looked on the internet, which you can do today, and I noticed that one of the principals had their accounting license suspended from '02 to '11, which what I'm told, it's pretty tough to get your accounting license suspended. So I'm just mentioning this because I think our finances should be by a large, independent accounting firm, very large, very experienced. We have a lot of money at stake, and we should pick the best and pay for it. There's a lot of money at stake. So these are the 4 goals that I wanted to try to accomplish today, and I think we're getting there. 1, I wanted to make sure we understand what happened. 2, I want to confirm that all these accounts will be reconciled. I haven't heard the time frame, though, of the accounts. I know you're doing them internally. The last time I was told it was June 30th.
June 30th for the payroll is what I told you the last time, and we're still on that time frame.
How about the pension account?
The pension account, September.
And the general disbursement account?
Just general disbursement, our target is December.
December?
That's correct.
Why do we have to wait 7 months?
Because again, we're using internal staff, the timing and the size of the account and the work that needs to be done.
So we're paying one accounting firm $500,000 to reconcile one account?
Well, we're not paying them that. That's the maximum amount of the contract. Hopefully they can get it done and we don't exhaust their contract.
Why wouldn't we have included these other reconciliations in that contract?
Because the thought process behind that is all the other accounts that you mentioned, except for Concash, are ZBA accounts. So what we put in goes out in checks. Concash is not. So
Okay.
that's where there was a book difference. So that's where we wanted to focus their attentions.
The consolidated cash account, what's the date that they're telling us that'll be reconciled by?
We're going through the work plan, and they just started last Monday, and the goal is to have something by the end of this week as far as the work plan.
So there's no time frame that we can tell the taxpayers when that'll be?
Today, not today, but by the end of the week as they finish going through their internal review of our processes, yes.
And
How
we'll
about-
provide that to the
And we'll
council
provide it
president
to
once
you.
we get this.
How about the PPDA account? Any idea when that'll be done?
October.
So let me go back over this. We wanted to make sure what happened, one. Two, we want to make sure all accounts are reconciled. Now I'm hearing the dates when they'll be reconciled. We want to find the 27.5 million that is not accounted for.
Right, you eliminate that discrepancy.
We want to put systems in place to ensure a lack of fiscal management will never happen again. In the future, I strongly believe our financial audits must be completed by a large, independent, and non-political third party that will not only audit our financial accounts and records, but also provide a corrective action plan that would include the following. Review the city management's response to issues raised in past audit reports, because I have 3 or 4 reports where they raised issues and we didn't really address them. 2, define penalties for uncorrected audit findings or for remaining non-compliant with the audit report. 3, lay out a step-by-step plan of actions to correct deficiencies identified in the audit report. And 4, review the performance and the completion of previous corrective action plans. This is an outline of a potential solution that I plan to introduce and hope that the administration and my colleagues on council will join me in working on this together for our city and for the benefit of our taxpayers. Thank you, Council President. Thank you for coming back. I hope to work with you on this, and I think the good news is we may have a lemon, but we can make lemonade out of this by doing this. So I think having an independent audit, it'll put a lot of people at ease. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good, Councilman. Any other witnesses? There being none, I want to thank you very much. You can go ahead. We're just trying to get the date for the continuation. We're good. 1 second, please. 2-minute break.
Yeah, no, that, well, this was part, meaning that the council
Thank you. This committee will stand in recess until Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018 at 2 p.m., at which time we will reconvene in City Hall in room 400. Thank you all very much.